Hello, everyone. This is Alkaline and Stacey Harding coming to you with another edition of Fourth Level Conversations. Good morning, Al. How are you, brother?
Good morning, brother. I'm fine. I'm here still. I'm here. So I guess what more could be said than that?
Well, the world's better that you are here, so I'm glad we're together to have a conversation today.
Yeah, it's the wonderful thing about doing these and about interacting with all the people we interact with is I'm amazed at how much I continue to learn and maybe learn at an accelerated pace as I get older and nearer to the end of the train ride for me. Um, and I'm grateful that I'm learning more and more, and in a way, more and more interested in life, almost like the light bulb burning brightest before it blows out or something. Because I suppose one of the benefits of aging is that you gather information from so many relationships to begin to create patterns of understanding of what seem to be more universal truths for all of us. And one of the things you and I were talking about this morning as we were discussing possible topics for today, one of the things I've learned to do in these podcasts is notice what life, God, the universe, experiences have brought me in terms of patterns of interaction with other people. And one that has slowly dawned over the last quarter century of doing the work I do and you do is how consistently in the course of my conversations with people, the issue comes back to a person's relationship with themselves as the foundation of the external world that's giving them experiences that they're busy reacting to, not recognizing that they're just treating the symptoms of their unhappiness or imbalance or fear rather than the source of it, which is coming to understand who they are in such a way that they can finally find self grace, self compassion, self love, self acceptance, which I think is impossible at level 3, but is inevitable at level 4. And thus the criticality of these podcasts for whoever sees them to really understand why you and I are doing them, which is for whoever's watching them, but also for ourselves so that we have a chance to learn from each other and learn from the process of creating these on the fly spontaneously without any script. So they're heartfelt dialogues between two souls that at some level are one soul, as is true for all people.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about as you were describing that, and when we got together this morning, that I really am grateful for the times we do this because I think it's just you and I truly just having a conversation, hoping that it brings some value to people out there that might see it into the world. But it is an opportunity whenever we're together for this 30 to 60 minutes for you and I to stop and think about things that are more important than just getting tasks done today. And I think anybody that's watching, there's no doubt every day you wake up and you might even be overwhelmed with what you have to accomplish today. And if you don't, then there's a scorecard in your mind that tells you you failed. And you maybe have diminished your self-worth and your self-esteem because maybe others had expectation of you, particularly in the professional world. You might have a boss that expected you to get certain things done, and maybe you didn't. And so it would be easy to stop and think I failed or I'm not good enough. And then I think what happens is we start to reflect that on others and we judge them. Are they good enough? Maybe they aren't, because, hey, I want to not be the only one that didn't get things done. So I'm going to point out that somebody else didn't too. And so that's a reflection of ourselves and maybe our own insecurities. And I think a lot of suffering and fear comes from being insecure because of a wrong perspective. You and I have talked about this almost in every podcast we've done, that our level 3 ego is going to cause our perspective to be probably unhealthy in most instances. Certainly it's there to protect us if we're getting about ready to get run over by a car, or our self-protection should step away. but we tend to not see the larger picture of who we are and what this life experience is about. Because if I really stop and think about any joy and happiness that I've had in my own life, it's when I figured out it wasn't about me. So I hope we can continue to just dig into that as viewers of life and viewers of our podcast. What does this tell me about myself, and what could I awaken to become more cognitive aware that might cause me to move out of my level 3 ego perspective to my level 4 values and soul identity? And Al, I know you will take us to great thoughts on that.
I talked a stranger out of suicide yesterday. So I have an organization I work with, and they have me on kind of a retainer where we have weekly group calls, and they're allowed to individually reach out and have individual sessions the company compensates me for and endorses. And this guy who had never been on these group calls, he showed up last week, and then he reached out while on this first group call to set up a time. So he came, he called me yesterday, and I obviously knew nothing about his life. And he starts out by saying, he's at first very vivacious and upbeat and kind of salesman-y and all that. And then once we get past that veneer, probably 3 minutes into the conversation, says, well, here's the truth. I recently got divorced. I'm struggling in the mortgage business. I don't see how it's going to get any better. I weigh 265 pounds because I've compensated by just eating. And I'm thinking it'd be better if I just ended it all. And so then the next hour, we proceeded to transform that state into a state where by the end, he was setting up a call for next week, because it was the first time that he had felt within himself a state of not being suicidal, of hope, of possibility, of a glimpse of the future that may not be a continuance or worsening of this bevy of things that have happened to him. And you've had times like this. I've had times like this. And so it was an interesting interaction because, as always, I don't remember anything about the conversation or what got said that had him shift. It just got said, and it was the right thing, and it was important to say it. But I came away with it realizing that once again, this person was in a state of starting to explore self-destruction out of a sense of failure, of self-loathing, and what, as they sort of shared with me the circumstances of the divorce and this and that and their life story. I had this guy do the 7-minute exercise, which I think we talked about in these podcasts. Describe your life in 7 minutes. And of course, 35 minutes later, he'd walk me down all the different roads, and you could see a pattern of the experiences and scripting that he'd had from broken childhood, broken parents, multiple divorces, big success where he was the big cheese, and then big failures and all that. And I realized that this guy is operating out of a sense of self-destruction because he no longer, it's like he's finally pulled the curtain back and seen the superficiality with which he built his artificial sense of self-esteem that abandoned him with the volatility of circumstances created by operating at the level of superficiality of level 3 ego. And what we had was a different level of conversation about his daughter and what it would mean to her if he decided to follow through on his plan. And ultimately, really what I did was I told him my story of my life and my moments where I felt exactly like that, and how just waiting through them without acting on them, and starting to look for new ways, new information, and new ways to consider the gig, and primarily expanding the context of things, can change the state and take away that decision. So it had me realize how common this is in our coaching experience, Stacey, you and I, with people of if you trace most people's unhappiness back, it comes back to them and often the dysfunctional decisions, actions, and intentions of their ego that have created karmic circumstances that they feel are happening to them rather than a consequence of something they've generated, which is often the case, maybe most of the time, maybe all the time. And their response, in a way, to the disappointment of the almost predictable consequences coming out of life choices and life preferences from an ego-based level of reality that has them then feel a sense of disappointment in themselves. And it really comes down to it's impossible to really love or trust yourself as an ego. And the criticality, therefore, of these conversations to move beyond the ego to your true self, because I think that's the school of being a human being is to be born into the amnesia and developing this premise that you're an ego, noticing the suffering that it creates, and then reaching that existential abyss where you have to decide whether to jump into the abyss or see if you can fly above the atmosphere that you've been operating at to a larger dimension of self that's a rediscovery of who you really are versus the illusion of who the human experience invites you to believe you are. What's your thoughts about all that?
Well, that's an incredible experience, and I'm so happy that he was able to connect with you, and I'm sure that you will continue that process. It is unique to him, and you shared your story, Al, and I think most people listening, maybe they could relate. Maybe they're saying, well, I'm glad that hasn't happened to me, that I've never felt that way. Well, I was Mr. Stable for 50 years of my life, 55 years of my life, and I went through some things like that, and I'd be lying if I say it didn't cross my mind. I didn't get to the point of despair where I thought I would act on it, but there's times where you might find yourself in depression or feeling lonely, and you might start considering, is it even worth it? I mean, if I'm not having any joy, or maybe I've failed, I've let people down, maybe I've even hurt people, and maybe I deserve that. It's all a lie. And that's the thing that I wish people could recognize when they start to feel that way, is it's just a lie. It's the world lying to you about what you should be like. It's the media telling you you're not successful if you don't have all these things, or you don't have, the perfect relationship, or you don't have all the material things that your neighbors have. I've come to believe that it's all just a lie, and it's probably the ego self that starts to believe in it, of course. But I'm trying to figure out in my own life, how do I look at challenges differently? How do I look at disappointments differently? And instead of saying, woe is me, go, oh my gosh, I have an opportunity to really learn from this. I have an opportunity to become stronger because I can endure it. I have an opportunity to realize that my life is not measured upon this temporary circumstance. And then I think what happens is that you become self-aware and self-confident, and then you're able to express to others how they are in the world, and help them see themselves in a way that perhaps they don't. I'm convinced of this. Anybody that's dealing with depression, sadness, and so forth, sitting alone, stewing on it is the worst thing you can possibly do. Get up and go seek somebody to serve. I don't care if it's opening the door for somebody walking in the grocery store, but do something in service of others. I believe in all my heart and mind, we were created for that purpose. We were created to be in communion with each other, to be serving one another, because it's an expression of love. And at the end of the day, that's what we all need. And it's probably at the end of the day, the really only core thing we do need, other than shelter and clothing and all those things. But love comes from serving others. Guess what happens when you start serving others? You'll find out you love yourself more than you ever knew.
As you were speaking, I was thinking of how much I enjoy these podcasts with you because of how much I respect and admire you. Because I think you're such a great example of overcoming. I don't know everything about your life. I know very little about your life, but what I do know about it, just having sort of recognized you across the room, is you were unusually handsome, still are for an old fart. You had an extraordinary golf game. You were a man of extraordinary and overt Christian conviction. You had high intelligence, and you had a hugely successful and powerful and influential career path, all of which I admired, none of which I felt I had, actually. And so I saw the guy across the room that seemed to have it all and made it look easy, and who I envied and probably was jealous of in my level 3, because this guy seems like he's probably never had a bad day in his life, and well deserved that he hasn't. And then you went through the dark night of the soul that we all go through eventually, with circumstances, with a marriage that went away, a career that went away, the impressions that we all rely on so much of what others think. Undoubtedly, it had to cross your mind that what must they think now that I've fallen out of grace from being next to the king of this substantial company for all these years, and I was the chief. You were kind of like, I don't know, you were like the Machiavelli of Cherry Creek Mortgage, that was sort of, the whispering in the king's ear, helping things move forward, and had a huge impact on a lot of people for a lot of years. And then it all changed, it seemed like, to an outsider very quickly. In a matter of 5 years or something, all these things that your ego could have very easily attached to and felt like was you went away. And when the circumstances that we little by little allow to define who we are to ourselves go away, we no longer matter. And we're never going to get it back. And we're disappointed in the fact that the hustle we believed was true isn't true. And the people we thought we could believe in, we shouldn't have believed in. I mean, it was fine to be with them, but ultimately they weren't who we thought they were, or whatever. And others may be thinking this or that. I think yours is such a great spiritual story, Stacey, because when you and I really first met after knowing each other for 35 years, we only really met 3 years ago or whatever it was. And I got to know this guy that had the spiritual endurance, I guess I would call it, faith, to trust God enough to wait and see what it is that was going to come his way that could have him re-engage with a positive relationship with life. And you did that so wonderfully. And I think you got there through the critical superpower of humility, of recognizing you weren't who the world thought you were, and that secretly you knew you weren't, but you just kind of hoped, like all of us, the wizard's curtain would stay closed, and it got open. And when it got open, for a lot of people, they can't stand the idea that somebody has seen them in a way other than the fantasy of what they thought that person was, usually based out of what they wish they were. That has nothing to do with the person. But you, my friend, my brother, are a great human being, because you've demonstrated what is the highest level of what we're all here to learn, which is how to get past the false story of our ego, because that precludes our ability to find self-compassion, self-love, self-acceptance. And you seem today to be far more healthy and admirable, because who you are today is admirable for a larger reason. You're admirable because of what you represent as the purity of spirit, and as a level 4 soul operating with clarity as to that being who he is. And as a result, your circumstances are changing. You've had the courage to go through the IMP program and make it your own. You've had the courage to create your own consulting business. Now you're creating an empire of chiropractic institutions. You're doing things economically, but you've stayed engaged with life, and you've trusted God enough to wait to see what was next by not mistaking your circumstances of a change of life circumstances as evidence as to your own unworthiness. And in doing so, you've revealed your exalted connection with God as a reflection of God through these podcasts and through all the people you interface with. So that's a rare gig, brother. And I admire it so much because it's something that none of us know if we've got the stones to be able to do what you've done. So in many ways, you are a pathfinder for the rest of us, Stacey.
Well, Al, I think I just had a couple of epiphanies while you were talking about that, and it's really what I'd like to share is not about me, but what others can learn from our own experiences. Because we often talk about we're not who we think we are. We're certainly not who others think we are. And as you were describing my previous life and career and so forth, I never really saw myself the way you just described. I saw myself as someone who wanted to do the right things and wanted to work hard and wanted to be of services of others. But I never really thought I was all that gifted to do it. And so the reality it probably is that I was probably more gifted than I gave myself credit for, but nowhere near as gifted as what you described, and nowhere near as influential and so forth as sometimes we perceive others to be. And so I think the message for other people is um, really dig deep in your own soul to learn who you are, what you want to be to this world, and so forth. Because I think about those things now, and I don't think any of it was wasted, Al. I think a 40-year mortgage career, and I'm hopeful and prayerful that the impact in people's lives and the people that worked with me and I guess under me, that they felt that they were in an environment where someone loved them and tried to help them be as successful in their lives as they could be. But when that came to an end, and do I wish, I want to say that I'm so glad I've gone through it all. But that might sound silly to say I'm glad that I went through a lost marriage. I'm not. But I am so much stronger because of it. I'm so much more aware of who I am and what I think this world is about for me and what I want to be for it. I don't fear death. I really don't. I don't at all because I believe there's more beyond this, just as we've talked many times. But I think the limitations that I've experienced, and maybe people watching that they've experienced, it's a lot of times rooted in fear. And when people um, seek to be built up by others, they're setting themselves up for disappointment. I know, trust me, I know. When you go through life trying to please others and have them praise and like you, the fall is imminent. You just don't know when, because human beings are frail and make mistakes, and they're going to let you down and they're going to hurt you, and you're going to diminish your own self-worth if you think that your worth was just what other people thought of you. Al, you've said this many times. What other people think and say about you is none of your business. And it's so true. And I'm more clear about that. And you've helped me on this journey beyond belief. But I almost consider a little of it now. There's that old ecclesiastic, old scripture that talks about it's all just toiling in the wind. And I feel sometimes that that's what we do in life. Instead of seeking deep connection with the people that are in our lives, deep connection with complete strangers who in 1 hour or less, you change the complete direction of his life, maybe for generations because of what's underneath him in his lineage, in 1 hour, because you chose to serve and be a tool for the spiritual God or the universe, however one wants to see that, to make a difference in a human's life. And it could last for generations. And so I look at that now and think, let's be busy finding success in our life. We've got to provide for ourselves. We've got to pursue that. But don't do it in such a way that you think there's going to be happiness at the end of it if your bank account just gets to a certain level, or if you get to retirement age. Listen, we're both at retirement age. You want to stop today, Al? I'm not stopping until I'm dead. You're not either. You have to have this purpose in going off having pleasure and enjoyment for yourself. I promise you, if you're watching and you think that's the goal, is let me get to the point where I can just travel and I can be on a beach and I can play golf. You're going to wake up one day and find it to be empty. It doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy those things. Have at it. Just don't make it your life's purpose. There's got to be more. And I just think it comes back to interpersonal connection and service of others. And you'll wake up and go, wow, it wasn't even me. It was God working in me. Wow, I must be important and worthy that God would use me in other people's lives. And I guarantee you, every single person watching can have that experience. It probably does. Maybe doesn't even know it. You and I see it every single day, Al. We see moments of divinity, whether you call it the same God that I do or not, doesn't matter. If you're watching, it's that you've got these things that you can't explain, but they're happening through you because of the fact that your life was not a mistake. It was, in my opinion, ordained from the beginning of the universe, and you have an opportunity to make the most of it. And if you get to the end and you have time to think about it on your deathbed, you're not going to be thinking about how many cells you had or how big you built a business and all that. You're going to be thinking about the love you experienced with others, primarily probably with your family and friends. Focus on those things. We got to do the task. We got to do all those things, but don't let them be the thing that's like measuring whether you're winning or not. We were talking earlier about this. It is okay to want to win. Winning doesn't have to mean that you defeated and you diminished another human being or another team. Winning can be that you performed this with the skills and the effort and the wisdom that you've been given. That's winning. The scoreboard isn't the definition of winning or losing. It's how you journey through this life. We're all going to make mistakes along the way. I promise you, anybody that has known me for all my life has watched them in buckets. I've made tons of them. I'm sure I still will. But today, I don't judge myself from it. I try to learn, forgive myself, apologize, and make amends where I need to. But this life is to be enjoyed, but it's through the service and love of others, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I agree that fulfillment and even final understanding of what your life is usually, maybe not always, but usually found through interfacing with others and helping them when they need help. But I think even that can be a level 3, level 4 thing.
Can be.
I think we can help people out of a sense. I think a lot of this is going on now, and I don't want to get into politics,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of this is going on now as people get caught in the political theater and they listen to their side and they demonize the other side. Both sides do it. And, the other side is evil and they're all the bad things, and my side's righteous and all the good things. And we tend to be blind to the theater of our own side. And so I think that there, maybe both parties, but in my perception, one party in particular is very sanctimonious and overt about helping people. And yet, so often, the very people at the top of that group are some of the most insidiously selfish people doing insider trading and doing lots of things that are secretly building their own nest. Look at the whole Epstein list thing with all these people we think are the high watermarks of humanity that have been on the plane, gone to the island, and done God knows what. So that's a level 3 approach, is to do it for the affectation of service. And I think, frankly, said with love and respect to all my religious brothers and sisters, it's one reason I'm not religious, is that my experience in life is far more often than not, I've seen people operating out of the affectation of what Jesus said to be or do, Buddha said to be or do, God, whoever said to be or do, thinking that parroting what was written in the Bible or in the Dhammapada or in the Quran or whatever, and means that somehow, you get the identity of being a believer, whatever that means to your particular religion, kind of get the credit. Your ego takes in as, yeah, I've got this now. And then you have to kind of act like it to make sure people know that you are that, when you're not really doing it from an authentic intentionality of care. You're doing it from an affectation of care. And that catches up to us because we can hide from the world, we can con the world or try to. I'm not sure how successful we actually are, but we can't con ourselves. And so the secret self-loathing that is built into being level 3, that I think is actually an ultimate sign of grace from God, because he makes operating as an ego-based identity, in my opinion, impossible to ever find real happiness, self-acceptance, or love, because the ego's gig is to live outside the in and impress the world so that maybe then I can think of me what I've made the world think of me, even though I've secretly all along known that it wasn't me. Level 4 is usually experiencing the karma of the level 3 attempt and suffering enough to figure, what have I got to lose by giving up on the whole illusion of me having any worth? And so then we often go into a place of negation of worth, because I'm such a failure, I'm not even going to try to impress other people now. I'm just going to give up on it all. But sometimes kicking around that lonely prison cell of our own self-loathing, we kick on a rock that turns over and says, try going inside to out. And so we start this inner exploration of, who am I? That's really what you and I have gone through in the last 3 years, Stace.
Yeah.
And again, why I admire you so much is because IMP, and what I've been trying to do really for 50 years, but professionally for 25, is to encourage others to look inside themselves for a different place of meaning and ultimately identity that isn't me pontificating and wisely advising. It's what I've done and had to do for survival, for even deciding to stick around, because I pretty early saw the emptiness of the other pathology. And then I wasted 20 or 30 years operating within that pathology until I finally decided I don't matter enough to even warrant that search any longer. I'm going to give up on the illusion of worth for me. And that moment, which is, the other side of the coin of depression, basically had me say, what have I got to lose by trying something different? And then I remembered, I used to meditate, and that was really helpful, because to get quiet beyond my thoughts that keep the illusion. And then through these countless experiences that I've had, it's all somehow culminated into this elegant stew of meaning that now has it not really mattered to me anymore what other people think of me or what I think of me, because I accept that the real me isn't my ego identity or my accomplishments. It's the impact I am allowed to have for whatever brief time I'm here on you and on other people. And because I find my fulfillment by helping other people move out of the illusion of their darkness into a recognition of who they are. I was telling Reese this morning before we started, Reese, I've been married 47 years, and I had this revelation in the shower this morning that the real key to relationships, the reason, and honestly, Stacey, I was thinking about you and Heather, and I was thinking of Reese and I was thinking, now, why have we stayed married and Stacey and Heather didn't? And I don't know if this is true, by the way, of what happened with you or Heather, but my observation would be with a lot of couples is that they get together for the wrong reasons. They get together out of attraction. She's pretty. He's handsome. He's successful. She's funny. She's sexy. He's this. He's that. He dresses nice. All that. All these kind of surface attributes, and it attracts us. And that's very compelling, because sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? We want to get together and then let's get married. And then and then you discover the humanity of the other person that starts to violate those fantasies that superficial attraction created, and starts to erode away the foundation of what you thought was love, which was merely attraction. But as I realized why Reese and I got together and stayed together was it really was an attraction. She wasn't physically my ideal sexual fantasy. She didn't have the right color hair. She didn't have the right body style. None of that. She was sort of a neutral, actually, I'd say, when it came to looks and personality. But I had one night in 1977 when I was working for her family, and I was looking at her. We were opening up another store they were creating, and I looked at her, and I had this overwhelming recognition of who she really was, and it had me recognize who I was, and that those were somehow connected at a higher dimension. And so what I realized in that moment was I've got to be with this person because this is the first time in my life I had a recognition of God inside of another person that didn't see that God themselves. And it had me recognize a glimpse of the God within me. So my conclusion in the shower was that relationships, not just marriages, but relationships as a whole, will have longevity and success if they are created out of recognition of the true identity of another, that in its own way is just an extension of your own identity,
Mhm.
as opposed to merely attraction, which too often is an aspect of superficial features that change with time and circumstance. What are your thoughts?
I think you could even take that beyond marriage, just the friends you choose to
Right.
pursue and so forth. It's all relevant, and
Yeah.
I think
Is
it
it true?
yeah, and I think it's removing the superficial impression we want others to have of us.
Yeah.
And so then it's kind of like I used to say when I was recruiting people into the mortgage industry, is that we need to go through this discovery process to where we kind of see the warts on each other's hands. Because if we see the warts and we still like each other, now we got a foundation. But if we just kind of look at the first impression and we don't uncover the things that might not be quite as pretty as it is on the surface, it might not last. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from that. And I think the first way to do that is just be authentic yourself with people. And if they don't like you, it's not going to be a friendship anyway. And so you don't need to worry about it. You just be your authentic, values based self, and you will have plenty of friends. You'll have plenty of relationships, and you'll have a great deal of joy and love when you experience those things. So,
It's actually what saved the guy's life yesterday.
yeah.
Was I went into the stories of my moments when I felt exactly like he was feeling and why,
Yeah.
and what happened out of that that had me wait. So the first step for anybody who's anxious, depressed, suicidal, and by the way, suicidal ideation, don't feel like that dooms you to committing suicide, because psychology studies show that suicidal ideation is normal.
Hmm.
It is common in everyone's life at some time, maybe often.
Yeah.
It is amplified by substance abuse.
Mm.
It's amplified by uh, not being healthy, not exercising enough, not taking care of yourself. Because at some level, you're giving up on yourself physically or whatever. And it's amplified by chasing the baubles of superficiality, money, looks,
Yeah.
power, whatever. So what I found myself doing, which is why I don't think of what you and I do really as coaching. I think it's something beyond that. I'm not sure what term to give it. Is I found myself naturally going into my story of when I felt as he felt. And I shared with him extremely personal experiences of overhearing my son threatening suicide, and he listened in silence. And I could tell that's what changed him. He said so because my transparency
Hmm.
of my humanity and my moments gave him a different perspective, that he wasn't somehow uniquely flawed and therefore doomed to ultimately take himself out of this ledger of self-negation that he had created triggered by his recent experiences. So that's why authenticity and humility is a superpower,
Yes.
because when you are truly humble, which is not self-negation in my mind, level 3 thinks it is. Level 3 thinks we have to talk ourselves down. I spent the first 50 years doing that. oh, Stacey, you say nice things. That's not true. Let me tell you why you're wrong. I'm really a dirtbag, whatever. That's level 3 humility, which is really kind of superficial humility that, no. You'll think I'm humble if I diminish myself. But to me, real humility, level 4 humility, isn't self-diminishment. It is simply a recognition of our level 3, and then recognize that something within us is a witness, looking at our level 3 ego as though from the outside. Well, what is that? That's our level 4. That's our soul. And Stacey and I talk about that being our values. Well, that's how its personality, as you could call it in the world, is to be an embodiment of values. But true humility level 4 is really the transparency of your soul beyond the limitations of an ego-based identity, to me. And when you're in that state of humility, you are a vehicle of God. You are a channel of divinity. And I think God, source, Yahweh, whatever you want, Jehovah, whatever you want to call it, can now trust you to flow truth. And I think that's really what we're trying to do with these podcasts, is flow truth. And not by saying, hey, you click below and subscribe, tell all your friends to listen to this podcast. Maybe we'll become influencers and we'll have 700,000 people follow us, and then we'll get advertisers and we'll make money. We're back on the gravy train. We don't care about that, you and I. What you and I care about, hang on a second.
No problem.
I'm still in the podcast, Holden. I'll call you when I'm done. Okay. My manager / son checking on, hey, yeah, the podcast, yeah, I got to talk. I find that this is really the point I guess I would like to make today. If I could make any one point for people, is that you aren't who your ego tells you are. And the way you escape the prison of that illusion is to notice the karmic consequences and ravages of operating out of the whispers of that ego. I'm not sure there's such a thing as an independent evil, a Satan. There may be, I don't know. But I'm confident there is an internal Satan or evil that looks great, feels like the most delicious immediate gratification you get, which is your ego, because it's going to lead you down a path that's going to create suffering. And the way for you to be, I wouldn't even say happy. I think there's a bigger place than happy. I think it's at peace with yourself. And like Stacey, not afraid of death, not afraid of what comes next, because you can now trust that you will show up and handle anything that ever occurs in your life as it comes, pleasant or unpleasant, and be able to really understand the how interesting story, because you will no longer be automatically impacted by it. This is Viktor Frankl in the death camps with Man's Search for Meaning. This is every great person who's ever been at the edge of the abyss and decided not to jump, but instead to wait and see if somehow the cool breeze of God doesn't come along and blow away the clouds and show a path down into that abyss and up out the other side that you have the courage to walk. I'll let you finalize today's conversation.
Yeah, as we wrap up, first of all, thanks for watching if you're still with us. And I wanted, on behalf of Al and I, just to extend this to you. Think about extending an invitation to yourself to look inside, free of judgment, and find your authentic self. You're there. You know it's there. You felt it. You've seen times where you're living in it, and then there's times you're not. But invite yourself. You have to give yourself permission. And sometimes we don't do it because we think it's going to be too painful. Well, trust me, there's something on the other side of that pain. It's called freedom and growth and love and wisdom. Give yourself permission to look inside, free of judgment, and find that authentic self. Al, this is always awesome to be with you. If you're a person that really wants to learn more about how to do what we're describing, reach out to Al, reach out to me. We are in this to be helpful. We're not telling you this so you'll become a client and pay us. It's not that. It's about helping you. And if you ever want to be a client, that'll be because you choose to. But we can help. Don't be afraid to reach out.
How do they reach out, Stace? I don't know that we ever tell them that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think you can find us in our contact information anytime if you looked at any of the Instagram or the YouTube videos and so forth. But I'll read off your phone number. I mean, I can do that too.
Yeah. Well, the probably easiest way to go at me is my website of integrative mastery programs. You can text me at 303-478-6344. You can contact me at alkilleen@mac.com and ALK at Integrated Mastery Programs. What's your contact information, Stacey?
You can get to me through Al too, but if you want to call me directly, 303-514-3677, or you can email me at Stacey, Stacey, at hourglasscg.com. We hope we can help.
Yeah, and the way we're going to help is we're going to help you see that you aren't who you think you are.
Yeah.
You're something far greater.
Indeed.
Thanks for you for watching us, and thanks, Stace. It's always a very grounding and rebalancing moment to get to be with you.
I agree. I enjoyed it so much. You guys all have a great day.
Love you. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.